I'm Debbie Way. I'm Vice President of MLS Administration with Canopy MLS. And I appreciate you asking me to do this presentation. This is our top MLS violations and how to avoid them. So getting started, just a kind of little overview of, how we're governed is we have two different documents that we abide by. Number one, we have our Canopy Mls Bylaws that are approved by our board of directors. And they're typically going to be addressing who can belong to the membership or to the MLS, who can join the MLS, and how our board of directors is structured. So you might be interested in that information. The second document, our Canopy MLS rules and regulations, to me is the more important document for the average member to read. And that document is going to, it's basically divided into two sections. And it's how your listings are required to be input and maintained in the MLS system. And then the second part is all about display of listings on the internet, your IDX rules and regs, your virtual office website rules and regs. So I feel like the rules and regs are much more important for our members to read and spend time trying to understand those. It's about 45 pages long, so, not too bad, could be worse. And I would just highly recommend everybody at least one time sit down and read through those. That way, at least you'll know, hey, I think there's a rule about this. And when you need to go back and review that, you'll know where to go to look for those. And they're actually really easy to find. And I'm going to take a gamble here and just show you where you can find those. If you're in Matrix and you click on that resources link right here on the left side, Canopy MLS rules and policies, and it should open to this page in our knowledge base where you can just click on that link right there and it's going to pull up those rules and regs for you. So if you weren't aware of where to find those, that's where you can find them. So the third thing that I want to just mention is Listing Data Checker. That is a tool that we as MLS staff use. It's actually also integrated into our Matrix system so that, and just FYI, I can show you that too, is if you're on the home page in Matrix, there's a widget for Listing Data Checker, and you can see that on your home page for Matrix. If you don't see it on yours, if you look under these additional widgets, sometimes it might be under there, and if you can just drag that out and drag that onto your home page there. But Listing Data Checker, it integrates with Matrix. It allows us to identify certain keywords that we search for to identify a potential violation of MLS rules. It also gives agents the ability to report data violations. So if you're in a listing and you see something, that you think is a problem, all you do is click on this little yellow caution sign underneath the photo, and that'll pull up a report where you can just submit that to us and let us know. You just type in your text there, let us know what you think the potential violation is with this listing and submit that. It comes to my staff, which is myself plus 2 or 3 other staff. A lot of us are cross-trained to do different things down at the MLS. But we look at those and, we try to determine whether or not we think there is a potential MLS rule violation. And this Listing Data Checker program gives us the ability to send emails out to the agents. We always copy the agent's broker in charge, member participant, to let them know as well. Most of those go out as warnings, especially if it's a data error, and the agent typically has 2 business days to correct whatever the data error is, and it's over and done with. There's no fine involved in those unless there's a repeat, like constant, if the agent is continually having repeat violations of that particular section of the MLS rules, and data quality is one of the rules that we have. So that is what we use listing data checker for. So it helps us identify those potential violations, and it helps us to communicate with the agents about those potential violations to get them corrected. Now, some of our MLS rules do carry fines, and I'm going to talk about those as we get through the program today, and just try to explain what the individual, fine amounts are for particular violations. And then finally, as far as governance and compliance, we ask that realtors hold each other accountable. So, I showed you the little yellow caution sign that you can click on, but an even nicer way to handle those situations is email the agent directly. When you click on that yellow caution sign, that email is coming to MLS staff. But if you want to communicate directly with your fellow agents, all you do is click on their name and the listing, and you can pull up an email address for them, shoot them an email and say, hey, I noticed in your listing, you said XYZ, but I think it should be ABC, and give each other the benefit of the doubt. That's what you would want them to do for you, right? Before, reporting something to the MLS. So, try to hold each other accountable. But if that doesn't work, and sometimes there are situations where agents feel that, it might be awkward, or they don't feel comfortable confronting another agent about a potential rule violation, then by all means, alert MLS staff, and we'll be happy to take care of that. So now in 2020, we had 3,982 violation notices that were sent out from Canopy MLS to the members. So now not all of those carried fines with them. So I want to make sure we're clear about that. But 3,000, almost 4,000 violation notices were sent out regarding the listings. And the top thing that we sent notices about was incomplete, inaccurate data in the MLS. So almost, a quarter of those were for that alone. So agents play a role in data quality. So number one, the listing data that you submit to the MLS for your listings must be complete and accurate in every detail that is reasonably ascertainable. And you notice, and that's the rule that I'm quoting there, you'll notice that the word here, reasonably ascertainable, is in red. So that is the level of expectation. If you're, getting a new listing, and, obviously those sellers aren't going to know everything about their property. They might not know the deed reference. They might not know the legal description. Maybe they don't know the parcel ID. I mean, those are things that most of us aren't walking around with and just have knowledge of. So, it's going to be important for that agent to go find out that information. And most of that information is readily available through tax records. We have our Realist tax database. We have tax integration, tax information integrated into Matrix that you're able to search for. So most of that should be available. You can go to your GIS websites for the county where you're listing the property. But every now and then you may come across a listing where you just can't find the deed reference, or maybe the parcel ID hasn't been assigned yet. We understand that those things can happen. So all you need to do, number one, our level expectation is, let's say you can't find it in your tax records, then you might need to call the county tax office. Sometimes that does happen where, maybe they lag behind and things aren't updated on the website as quickly as they might be updated, internally. So you may need to give that tax office a call to try to find out that information. Never put 0, NA, unknown, anything like that in a required field of the MLS, because that will definitely get flagged as a potential violation. And, we do proactively monitor the required fields in MLS. So it is something that we look for to make sure those fields are filled out completely. Now, when it comes to square footage, agents often ask us these questions. Am I required to report square footage? Where can I obtain the square footage? So if the property is listed in North Carolina, you're probably aware that the North Carolina Real Estate Commission does not require square footage to be reported. But if you do report it, then that triggers their residential square footage guidelines. And since Canopy MLS, we do require square footage to be reported on properties listed in the MLS. So that's what triggers that, that Real Estate Commission residential square footage guidelines to come into play. So, and then South Carolina does not have similar standards or guidelines as North Carolina. So if your listing is in South Carolina, count yourself lucky. But for North Carolina, if we do get a complaint that the square footage in the listing is inaccurate, what we will do is reach out to that listing agent, ask them to verify the accuracy of the information that they've reported. Typically, they will do that by sending us a copy of their sketches that they drew or a floor plan that they had diagrammed. But you know, every now and then we'll get an agent just kind of disregard, or maybe they don't know, and they say, well, we got it from tax records. And so in that scenario, we'll circle back with that agent again and politely remind them, well, did you know that in North Carolina, the residential square footage guidelines require you to obtain that square footage either by measuring it yourself or having a qualified professional do it for you? And if their response is still, you know, I don't care, then in that scenario, what we'll do is we'll go back to the agent that complained and let them know, hey, you know, here's the situation. We think you need to report this to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. So just so you're aware, is that's how those types of complaints will be addressed. Inappropriate branding is the second most common violation that we deal with. We had 1,269 of those in 2020. And what we mean by that is in your listings, you're not allowed to have any information that might lead a consumer directly back to the listing agent, listing brokerage, or seller in any of the fields that the consumers can see, which are the public remarks, the directions, the photos, photo captions, and unbranded virtual tours. So in those fields, you cannot have any information that will lead that consumer directly back to the listing agent, listing brokerage, or seller. That information is allowed in the agent remarks, the company remarks, and the syndication remarks. Those are the three other remarks fields that we have in the listings. And you also have a field for a branded virtual tour. Now, other agents using the MLS will not see the link for that branded virtual tour, but we distribute that along with these syndication remarks out to third-party websites like, well, your IDX websites receive this information. That way on your own listings, if you want to display those syndication remarks in the branded virtual tour, you can. We also provide that to all of the list hub sites like homes.com, realtor.com, you know, any of those third-party sites where they're not actual participants of the MLS, but they display listing data. So that is the purpose of those fields. So then the next, and just backing up here, so if there is a violation of this inappropriate branding, that would be what we consider to be a Category 1 violation, which, like the inaccurate data, we'll send a warning on that. And then all you would be required to do is just remove that inappropriate branding from the listing. It's over and done with at that point, as long as you do that within 2 business days. But if, like I said, if there's a repeat violation, or if those emails aren't addressed within that 2 business days, then we're looking at a $100 fine for that particular violation. Okay. Now, the potential fair housing violation, we had 225 of those notices that we sent out in 2020. And what we are looking for here is when you're describing properties in the MLS, you should avoid indicating any type of preference of one group over another. And that would be descriptions that relate to race, color, religion, age, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. And then also, and this is where agents tend to get caught, is never include any references to racial, ethnic, or religious landmarks nearby. And it's usually the religious landmarks in our area because we have a church on every corner, right? So you want to be careful of putting something like turn right at Calvary Baptist Church in your directions, or things like that. And we actually just did a session this past Friday. I don't know if you got to see it, but there will be posting links to it. I think maybe in e-headlines, which goes out next Monday, but because we recorded it. But as far as like, what the fair housing regulators are looking for is to describe the property and not who the property is best suited for. So don't try to describe the buyer, but describe the property. So, and some of the examples that I had shared on that session on Friday were, where we had agents asking and putting things like close to the JCC, which stood for Jewish Community Center. And obviously you can't do that because, that would be a situation where it looks like we're trying to appeal to a certain type of buyer, and for the same reason, we also say you can't put things in the listings like close to the YMCA, because we have to, look at everything fairly and equally. And so a lot of agents get really upset by that we have taken that position, but it's not that we're trying to pick on any, one particular thing. It's just that we have to, treat all of those situations equally. So what you could do there instead is you could say something like close to fitness centers or close to rec centers or something like that, where you're not using like a formal name or, referring to any particular type of religion in those remarks. So we do check for potential fair housing violations, but we do not issue fines. So if we do see something in a listing that we think could be a potential fair housing violation, we send a notice to the listing agent and the member participant, broker in charge, so that they're aware. And we're basically requesting, go in and revise the remarks of this listing, right? Usually there's a different way or a better way to say what you're trying to impart. But if we feel fairly certain that it would be a potential fair housing violation based on guidance that we've received from our legal counsel in the past, sometimes we have to check with the National Association of Realtors staff to get their impression of things. But if we have run into something in the past where we've been told, yeah, that could be a potential issue, we will take those things out as the MLS. So we'll remove the problematic language from the listing. We'll still notify the listing agent and the broker in charge of the change that's been made. So because they still may want to go in and reword the remarks how they want them to be worded. But we do that as a protection for ourselves. Canopy MLS can be fined by HUD as the media outlet, the advertising outlet for these listings going out to thousands of websites. And agents can actually also be held accountable too. If there is information on your website, a listing, it may not even be your own listing, but there was a lawsuit in Florida that happened where an agent was sued because their IDX website had a listing on it that had discriminatory language in the remarks of the listing. So now that case was settled, thank goodness, but it does kind of just show that these things can and do happen from time to time, especially in the society that we're living in. So that is our potential fair housing situation. For security, we had 239 of these notices that we sent out last year. And these do tend to carry immediate fines. Security is a real important issue for us. So the particular rules that we have here is that you cannot have any lockbox or security system codes in the MLS. We have over 20,000 members now, and I'm sure most of them are great people, but you never know when somebody's going to go off the deep end, right? So you don't want to have any type of access information to a home right in the MLS where anybody can see it, and have access to that home without having to make an appointment and take that extra step to get access. So do not put a lockbox or security system code in the MLS. That'll carry an immediate $100 fine. Any type of, you have to have an agency agreement in order to install a lockbox on a home. So make sure you have that. Not having that carries a $500 fine. Make sure you keep, and this can actually manifest itself in a different way. After your listing sells, make sure you're removing those lock boxes from the listings, because if we get calls from the homeowners, hey, there's this lockbox that's been here for several weeks, the listing agent never removed it, then this rule can be used to require that lockbox to be removed. Make sure you keep your Supra key, and if you have the Sentry key, make sure you keep those PIN numbers private, especially with that old display key. I know some agents are still using it. We have about 4,000 of those out still in circulation, although those are going to go away when we do the conversion from Sentry Lock to Supra. But make sure if you do have that display key, keep that PIN number private. If you have the Sentry card, never attach that PIN number to the display key or a Sentry card. If we see that, that would carry an immediate $500 fine. Because if we see that, then we're assuming that the reason that those PIN numbers are being attached to those devices is for the purpose of sharing them, and they cannot be shared. And if we do ever find out about a situation where somebody has loaned their key, that display key or a Sentry card, that would carry an immediate $1,000 fine. So that is that's a big concern to us. And this is our most costly fine level, deals with that. So also always make sure you have an appointment before you show a property. I know, especially in this, time that we're in right now, it's difficult to get these appointments to show properties. But if you ever show up at a home without an appointment and you're surprising that homeowner, they're not expecting you, that would carry an immediate $500 fine. So if you do find yourself in a situation, you have to make sure you have a confirmed appointment before you show. Call showing time, call the listing agent if you need to directly, and get permission to show. But what you don't want to do is drive by the property and have a conversation with the homeowner, because that can result in this $500 fine. You should not be having any direct communication or direct contact with the homeowner. All of those requests for appointments need to be going through the listing brokerage. The only exception to that would be if the listing brokerage has given you permission to go direct to the homeowner to schedule those appointments. So, and then the other is make sure you're at the right house before you access that lockbox and before you open the door. We have had situations where there are two homes listed for sale side by side, and the agent, went into the wrong home. So always make sure you double check that before you go into the house. And then this one is a new rule that we implemented. It wasn't last year, I believe it was in 2019, that a buyer agent can only remove a key from a lockbox prior to closing if they have the express permission of the listing agent. I know there's kind of a thing out there where agents are just kind of, trying to do each other a favor, bringing keys to closing, things like that. But you've got to have that permission first before you remove keys from the lockbox prior to closing, because there have been situations, especially if it's a contentious transaction, which sometimes they are, unfortunately. And if there's, sour grapes, these things can come back. So you don't want to try to, or you don't want to open yourself up to those kinds of potential situations. So always have permission first from the listing agent before you remove a key from a lockbox prior to closing. And feel free to stop me if you have any questions as I move on. Now, and then another rule that kind of, in some ways I think both of these were adopted close to the same time in 2019. The person opening the lockbox must be the person for whom the appointment is made, unless expressly authorized in writing by the seller. So we had some situations where, you'd have a different person showing up at the showing than who the appointment was made for. So that can be an issue, but you do still have the ability through showing time. Let's say you're with a home inspection company, right? And we've had these situations where, maybe you have an admin who's making appointments on behalf of the other inspectors in the office. That's okay. That can still occur. And, if the appointment is made under, let's say, Jack, right? But it's going to end up being Jerry going out to do the inspection. If the admin has typed in or has made it clear that I'm scheduling this appointment, on behalf of ABC Inspection Company, it could be either Jack or Jerry who show up to do the inspection. We're okay with that. The main point here is communication, and you need to have that clear communication between the agents and the inspectors. Who's going to be at the inspection. We're not trying to say that you have to use showing time to schedule all of these. I mean, that's okay. It needs to be clear, though, whose responsibility it is to schedule that appointment and who's going to be there at the appointment. And that's all that we were really trying to impart there, is that you just have to have that clear communication. Okay. Any questions on that? Right. And then also, if the potential buyer will be present for the inspection or the appointment with a general contractor or an inspector, then a licensed real estate agent must attend, unless express written permission has been granted by the seller or the seller's representative for the buyer to attend the inspection or appointment with the general contractor without a licensed real estate agent. So, and this kind of came about, we had inspectors who were frustrated about buyers being there without their agents. Those inspectors aren't paying attention to what the buyers are doing while they're trying to do their job and do the inspection. So it creates liability for the inspectors. And, there was frustration on the part of listing agents. So there was just a lack of clarity there. So that's why we implemented this rule that, and if the seller grants permission for that to happen, then that's fine. But, otherwise you have to have a licensed real estate agent. We're not necessarily saying it has to be the buyer agent, but there has to be a licensed real estate agent there, unless given permission by the seller for that not to occur. So that particular violation would be a $500 fine if it's reported to us. So generally, things dealing with showings, things dealing with appointments are going to be at that $500 level. And then sharing that super key would be, or that Century Lock card would be at the $1,000 level. So that's kind of it. Oh, no, one more for security. Also, you need to protect your MLS login name and password. So when you log into the MLS, those credentials are for you and only you. They cannot be shared with any type of administrative assistant, certainly not a buyer or a seller. They are only for the individual that we have granted that access. So if we are ever aware of password sharing, that would carry an immediate $1,000 fine if we find out about that. So if you do have an assistant or a teammate who needs to have access to the MLS, they need to sign up to join, just like everyone else. And we do have security software that searches for this, and it can detect possible password sharing. So if you've ever gotten those messages or emails from our system that, it has detected risky behavior, step one is always change your password, right? And that should take care of it. Change your password, don't share it with anyone. That should solve the issue. But if you do continue to get those kinds of notices, we want you to reach out to us. Let us try to help you figure out what's going wrong. There can be some computer settings that can trigger issues. Generally, though, what we find out is there's password sharing that's going on, and maybe the agent just didn't know about it, or they didn't realize that they were doing something the wrong way. So if you do get those and you're not sure what's causing it, just reach out to us and we're happy to help resolve that. Okay, digital image required. We've had 138 of these violations in the past year. Basically, all that means is you need to provide a photo when you save your listing as active in the MLS. The exceptions for that are for land, or if the seller opts out. We do want you to take your own photos or contract with a photographer to do that. Never copy another agent's photos. I can tell you, number one, the other agent, if they lost the listing, they're already mad. And now if they see another agent stealing their photos, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to file a complaint against you. So never do that unless you have specific written authority from the previous listing agent and you know that you've got permission from the copyright holder of those photos to use them in the MLS. So we do have some rules about virtual staging. You can look at those in the MLS rules. I'm not going to repeat them here, but basically the bottom line is if you use virtually staged photos, you need to, along with the virtually staged photo, also have a photo of the view that's not virtually staged. And on the virtually staged photo, you have to have, some kind of indication that it is a virtually staged photo superimposed onto that photograph. And then for new construction, we do allow photographs of something that maybe they built somewhere else. That's okay. But if it's not a photograph of the actual listing, or if it's an artist rendering, you have to include on it, a disclaimer that says example photo. Because we have had situations where agents go out to a property expecting to see something built. And, if it's just an empty lot, they feel like they've been misled. So you do have to have example photo on anything for new construction that is not of the actual property. The next was listing status change violations. We issued 102 of those last year. These do carry an immediate $100 fine when we issue those. And here's the list of all of our statuses. We have coming soon, no show status. You can use this up to 21 days prior to the delayed marketing date in your listing. You have 1 business day to report these from when you start marketing the property. So on a coming soon listing, once you post it on Facebook, or you are, putting any type of advertisement out on that listing, putting a sign up, that counts as public marketing, then you have 1 business day to get that listing submitted to the service. And you can use coming soon, no show status for that. Okay, and then days on market do not accrue while it's in that coming soon, no show status. And then for IDX and syndication, we do send out the coming soon, no show status listings to IDX websites, which are your brokerage websites, but we don't send them out to syndication sites. So like realtor.com, homes.com, list hub sites, they're not going to be getting these coming soon, no show status listings. The next status is active. That means the listing is currently on the market. You have 1 business day, from either the effective date or that delayed marketing date in your listing agreement to get that listing submitted to the service. So days on market start accruing based on that delayed marketing date or the marketing date that you put in your listing. And we send active listings out everywhere that the brokerage has indicated that they want their listings to go. So the brokerage has the ability to control, all of their syndication settings that they have for listings. And that would be your member, participant, broker in charge. Then for under contract show and under contract no show, once you have a signed purchase agreement by the buyer and the seller, that's when the clock starts ticking. You have 2 business days from the effective date of that purchase agreement to update the status of the listing in the MLS. So, and that's based on the effective date. Doesn't matter if you don't have your due diligence period money collected yet. Doesn't matter if you haven't gotten that earnest money deposit yet. As soon as that purchase agreement is signed, that's when the clock starts ticking. So agents get confused by that sometimes. And then whether you're showing or not showing is totally seller directed. So if it's under contract, but your seller wants to continue to show the property, a lot of times that's what they'll want during that due diligence period. They can continue to show, and that can actually occur all the way up until the day of closing if that's what your seller wants to do. But once your seller gets to the point where they don't want to show that property anymore, you have to change the status. I've actually had an issue with this week where I think it's probably because of this tight inventory market that we're in, but we're now starting to see people are looking at these under contract show listings a little bit more than they did in the past. And there was a situation where the listing was on under contract show. Another broker wanted to show it because he had a seller. I think this was maybe a condo community, and this particular buyer owns 2 or 3 other units in that community, and the buyer, was interested in buying more, and so that they wanted to see it, but the seller denied that showing. They didn't, they were getting closer to closing, they denied it. I ended up getting a complaint about that and had to issue a $100 fine. So be careful about those, so that you change that status when that seller no longer wants to show. Now, days on market stop accruing when it goes under contract, regardless of which one you choose there. Under contract show goes out to all of the sites as far as listing distribution. Under contract no show only goes out to the IDX brokerage websites. It does not go out to the third-party syndication sites. So this one kind of gives, this one in the coming soon no show status kind of gives our brokers a leg up in that you're able to display this information on your brokerage sites and the third-party syndicators are not. So that was the thought process there. Next, we have our temp off market listings.
Hey, Debbie, I have a quick question about that. So if it doesn't show up on the syndication sites, does it still just show as active, or will it show pending? Like, does it show under contract at all?
Well, it's what you have in the MLS.
Gotcha.
So if it's in the MLS on, no, okay, so on some of those sites, it just kind of drops off.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to say like maybe realtor.com is like that, like if so once you've got it in under contract no show, it's just going to be like property is not, they're not going to have any kind of status information until it actually shows up as sold. Yeah.
So would you recommend that agents put no show if that's the case, or would you recommend they leave it at show? I mean, obviously it's up to the seller, but which one?
Don't let what happens on third-party sites control how you treat your listing in the MLS.
Okay.
I recommend that you follow your seller's instructions. If they're going to show, put it on under contract show. Okay. If they don't want any more showings, put it on under contract no show.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. So for temp off market status, if you've got a listing agreement in place, but the seller doesn't want the property to be shown, they're not looking for offers, use temp off market status. A lot of times this gets used by agents when their seller basically wants out of the listing agreement, but the firm's not willing to let them go. You would use temp off market for that. We have had some situations now that we have clear cooperation where agents are using temp off market because the listing has to be in the MLS because there's an agreement and it's being publicly marketed, but they are not actually wanting to, solicit those offers. So temp off market is seeing more uses now that, some of our rules have changed in the past couple of years. So just be aware of that. Days on market do not accrue while it's in temp off market, and we don't send these out to your brokerage sites or any syndication sites. They do go out to what is known as a virtual office website. which is, we have very few of those, but they do exist. So there is a possibility that some sites might be have access to these temp off market listings. So withdrawn status, when your listing agreement is terminated prior to the expiration date of the listing, that's your withdrawn status. So you only use that when that agreement's been terminated. If the agreement is still in place, then you would put the listing on temp off market status. So withdrawn status listings can only be withdrawn by your member participant broker in charge of the firm. Okay, the average subscriber to the MLS does not have access to withdraw a listing. And the reason for that is that it's a coaching opportunity, right? Agents should go to their broker in charge when they've got a seller who wants to terminate and ask, how do I deal with the situation? And get that extra coaching. But then also the firm owns the listings. So the broker needs to know anytime there's a situation where an agent is letting a seller out of their listing agreement. So that is why it's that way. We have had situations where agents put a listing in temp off market status and forget about it when they should have actually gone to their broker in charge and have it withdrawn if they were terminating. So be careful of that. If the intention is to withdraw a listing, always make sure you go to your broker in charge and make sure it gets done. So, that's kind of how those are. And then expired status. Expired automatically happens at midnight on the expiration date of the listing. So there's nothing the agent has to do. The system does this for you. But it does kind of drive home the importance of making sure the expiration date that you input into the system is correct. You never want to fudge this expiration date. I have come into situations where agents have done that because they were trying to give themselves some extra cushion to follow up with that seller to, try to get them to relist or extend the listing agreement. But if that seller has decided they don't want to continue to market the property with that particular firm, maybe they want to move on to a different firm, then that's what sets you up for those conflicts, right? So if another broker is expecting to be able to submit that listing to the MLS and they can't because it's still showing as active or on any of these other on market statuses, it will not allow them to input that listing. So failure to remove a listing when there's no longer a listing agreement in place would carry that immediate $100 fine. So be careful of that. And then closed status, once your listing sells once it's closed, within 5 business days, you have to update the status to sold. I don't think we see as much of this as we used to see, but there is a tendency for agents to kind of forget about, going in and closing out their listings. So just make sure you update the status of the listing to closed once it does close. And we do send sold listings out to IDX and third-party websites. So I think most of you are probably familiar with that. Now, our coming soon no-show status, just a little bit more on this. Always make sure you have a signed listing agreement in place before you put any listing into the MLS. Some agents have been under, the false understanding that coming soon was for things that they think they were going to get a listing agreement for. And that is not the case. You got to make sure you have that signed listing agreement before you input a listing into the MLS, even on coming soon no show. Use the coming soon no show form. Get your seller to sign that form. Canopy MLS, we've provided our forms to zip forms. So they are in the zip form library under Canopy MLS. You can find our forms in Matrix. I'll go show you where to find those. They're back on this resources tab. Click right here, Canopy MLS forms, and you'll find them there as well. But that form explains how coming soon no-show status works. And it helps you kind of CYA with your sellers so that they understand it means there can be no showings while it's in this status. And if there is a showing while it's in coming soon no show status, that carries an immediate $1,000 fine to the listing agent. So very important. There's a certain level of trust that you have to have with those sellers, to know that they're not going to violate that rule behind your back. If you think they are, don't use coming soon no show status. Don't do any marketing until it's ready to go into the system as active. But if you can trust them and you think they'll abide by the rules, use coming soon no show. Just make sure they understand that there can be no showings, and what I'm hearing right now is, you've got buyers and agents basically circling the neighborhoods like sharks, right? Hoping to get to show a property. And if those buyers and those agents do approach your seller and ask for a showing, you need to be coaching your sellers what to say in that situation. I'm sorry, we're not going to allow any unscheduled, unannounced showings. Here's the business card for my agent. Please call my agent to request a showing, right? That is the right way to handle that situation. And coach your sellers, because it is awkward when somebody is out mowing the grass and somebody just pulls up and asks for a showing. They don't want to miss out on a showing. So they might agree to it, but it's actually, it really puts them at a disadvantage. Number one, the house may not be, as presentable as it could be if they're being caught off guard. Number two, they could divulge information. Oh yeah, we're hoping to move to Florida. My daughter's down there. She just had a baby. We want to get there real soon. And that's compromising their position in negotiations, right? So be sure to, coach your sellers on how to handle that situation, to just say, nope, you're going to have to contact my agent to request a showing. So no days on market accrue while it's in that coming soon no show status. And we do display coming soon no show on IDX and VOW, not syndication. We just kind of mentioned that. And then you've got that $1,000 fine for showing a property while it's in that coming soon no show status. So now the next potential violation, failure to submit listing. We had 64 of these in 2020. And that was a significant jump for us. We typically would see probably maybe 10 of those a year. But because of this new clear cooperation policy that we implemented in May of 2020, this number jumped. And so the next few slides is going to be very much about the clear cooperation policy. So when we implemented that policy, we shortened the listing submission grace period. It is now 1 business day. So within 1 business day from either the effective date or the delayed marketing date of your listing agreement, the property must be submitted to the MLS, okay? Now, if marketing of the listing occurs prior to the delayed marketing date, then that's also going to trigger clear cooperation, so what that says, within 1 business day of marketing a property to the public, the listing broker must submit the listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage website displays. So yes, IDX and VOW, but that would mean the listing's already in the MLS, right? So it could also be if you're, advertising your featured listings on your brokerage website, and maybe those aren't tied to the MLS. So if you're doing any public advertising of that listing, digital communications marketing, like an email blast. We get these things forwarded to us all the time where agents are saying, things like, hey, I've got a pocket listing, want to let all my friends know. That's public marketing, and that's going to trigger this clear cooperation policy. And that also includes Facebook and your social media, multi-brokerage listing sharing networks. So if you're going on to that Charlotte area network Facebook page and posting, hey, I've got a pocket listing, the emails start flying in right after people do that, right? So to us, reporting that. So make sure anytime you're posting a listing, an upcoming listing, number one, you have a signed listing agreement. And number two, you're prepared to put that listing into the MLS within this one business day, because that is going to trigger clear cooperation. And any other type of application available to the general public. So that would be like a mobile app or, something like that, next door, who knows. Now, we also had to change what our required and optional listings were when we implemented clear cooperation. So what is mandatory for submission to the MLS is all of your exclusive right to sell and exclusive agency listings for single family, condo townhouse, lots, acres, farms, and multifamily. And that's defined as 4 units or less. Okay. If it's more than 4 units, that gets into your commercial realm. So it does not apply to commercial properties, rental properties, auction properties, fractional listings, and new construction that is proposed and under construction. So, but if you do submit any of these optional listing types, once you put it in the MLS, then you're obligated to report those status changes as the life of the listing continues. So when it goes under contract and when it closes, it's not okay to submit a listing and just withdraw it. Even if it's one of these optional listing types, you have to follow through on status changes. So a little bit more information about new construction. So the certificate of occupancy, our definition for new construction is that the certificate of occupancy is no more than 2 years old. The home has never been lived in, and new construction does not include remodeling. And so the clear cooperation rule is that for new construction, you may submit those properties that are proposed and under contract that have not received a certificate of occupancy. So, we like that. We want to get that new construction into the MLS, even if it's not completely built, but it's optional at that point. Once it's completely built, if it's not already under contract when the CO is issued and there's a listing agreement for it, then the listing must be submitted to the MLS. Okay, so that's kind of how this policy applies to new construction. And if the property is already under contract at the time the CO is issued, then there's 2 options for the listing brokerage. You can either input the listing as a new listing and immediately update the status to under contract. And some brokers like to do that because they want, even though days on market is not going to accrue, it's still going to show some time in the MLS. And some brokers like to do that. They feel that it helps with appraisals. So, that's one option. The other option is after it closes, it can be submitted as a comp sale. And we created a particular kind of comp sale specifically for new construction so that the agent would be able to input everything all at one time, who the listing broker is, who's the selling broker, without having to save it as active, update it to contract, and then report it as closed. This allows you to just input everything and save it as closed all at one time. So that's been a real big time saver for our agents who deal with new construction. So now, failure to input a new listing that is required to be input into the system is a Category 2 violation. So that's where it's going to carry that immediate $100 fine. Failure to report a listing status change or failure to report a listing's correct status is also that Category 2 violation, and it's going to carry that $100 fine. Nothing makes an agent madder than to spend a whole weekend with a buyer showing properties. They submit an offer, come to find out it's already under contract and has been for several days, and the agent just forgot to update the status. So having correct statuses in the MLS is one of the main things that's important to us. So now, clear cooperation, we talked about listings must be submitted. There is still an opportunity for what you call pocket listings, but it should be few and far between, very rare. And that will be, it is important that sellers who have these privacy concerns and are concerned about wide exposure of the property need to have an option to not submit the listing to the MLS. And that, maybe that would be a divorce situation where they don't want everybody to know their business. And I get that. Or if you have a celebrity client, which we have in our market, we have Panthers players, Hornets players, elected officials, top CEOs of companies, right? I've had government officials before not want their property to be listed in the MLS. So those are some of the common ones, but I know we have actors in our market too. So there are celebrities. So in that situation, you get that seller, they sign what we call our Canopy MLS firm exclusive agreement. That is in addition to your regular exclusive right to sell listing agreement. And that firm exclusive agreement kind of spells out how this process works. And what it says is that the listing brokerage or any other entity cannot publicly market that listing in any way. Because if you want to publicly market a listing that's withheld from the MLS, you're not cooperating with other brokers who participate in the MLS. And the point of MLS is firms cooperating with each other. So that is kind of our ultimate, guiding light, our North Star is cooperation, firms cooperating with one another. So in a firm exclusive listing, the firm can promote the listing between brokers and licensees that are affiliated with the listing brokerage. So you can promote it internally to other agents in your firm. And then one-to-one promotion among these licensees and their clients is not considered public advertising. So you can email your buyers that you're under a buyer agency agreement with, that you have a firm exclusive listing, but you can't be notifying prospective buyers who are not your clients. And that means that you have, either an agency or non-agency relationship with them, but it's, a solidified relationship. They're not your prospects. So here's what the form looks like. Obviously, we're the MLS, we're Canopy MLS. We're going to tout what the benefits of MLS are on this form. So, because we think a lot of sellers and agents don't realize all of the different options that are available to them. So, number one, submitting the listings to the MLS means it's going to go out to thousands of realtors in North and South Carolina who have buyers who are interested, right? So putting the MLS achieves that maximum exposure. That's what's going to, potentially increase the price of the offers that you get. And most sellers want to get the most money for their listing, right? There are some who have other concerns, but for the most part, that's going to be what appeals. But at the direction of the seller, it is possible to, you can have the listing go out to all of these thousands of sites that we syndicate listing information to, but it is possible for a seller to just have their listing in the MLS and not go out to all of those third-party sites. You have the internet yes, no field. If you click no in that field, that listing is only going to be in the MLS. It is not going to go out to all of these other sites, okay? So that's one option. And, your sellers don't necessarily have to use showing time. It's a great benefit that showing time coordinates all of these appointments for agents and sellers and buyers. But, if you have a situation where the listing agent wants to control that process, that is totally an option, right? You could have it so that all appointments go through the listing agent or the listing brokerage, and you could have it so that maybe you're requiring pre-qualification for all buyers. Totally acceptable to do things like that. Totally acceptable for a listing agent to accompany all showings. I know it's not that prevalent in our market, but there are other markets where that's the norm. So, just things to be aware of if you do have one of these types of, high profile clients where they expect a higher degree of service. So, but still, if your seller decides, I don't want my listing in the MLS, that can be done. All you have to do is fill out this information. Up at the top here on the right, it's going to explain what to the seller. Okay, that means you're severely limiting the marketing capabilities of this listing to just the firm and to just the firm's clients. And then they're going to sign off on the fact that if there is a situation where the property is publicly marketed, or if there is cooperation between the listing brokerage and another brokerage representing a buyer, then that's going to trigger clear cooperation. And the listing is going to have to be submitted to the MLS. So it was very important to the board to have this section in this form, because they felt like as long as the seller understands that if these things happen, we're going to have to submit it to the MLS, then that would clear up any situation where the seller might object and say they didn't know. You've got to have it, we've got it on the form. You've got to explain to the seller, if these situations happen, we have to put it in. And the reason why is because, yes, maybe the seller has sworn the firm to secrecy about the listing, but if that seller is telling, Joe and Jill and whoever else, hey, I've put my house on the market with Wilson Realty, then, and Joe or Jill or whoever else tells their friend, and the buyer comes about through that, and that buyer's working with an agent from a different firm, it's really kind of on the seller that they were the one who, brought that about. So we felt that was really important to include here because it helps to address that word of mouth situation that comes up. And then finally, your seller, they can check whether or not they allow the listing to be submitted to the MLS after it closes. So if it is, sold in-house. So they sign off on that. We used to have you guys emailing these forms to us. You can still email them to us, but we have created a different process that we want you to follow. And if you go back to this resources tab and then click on the Canopy MLS forms link, down here is where you've got that firm exclusive agreement. Right below that, you've got this firm exclusive registration. When you click on that, it lets you choose the agent in the office. And then all you have to do is put in the street number, street name, and let us know if that seller is going to consent to having the listing in the MLS later. And this is much easier for the agents than emailing that form to us. And it kind of helps keep track of all of the firm exclusives that the firm might have. And this is only visible to the listing agent if there was an admin in your office who has permission to do these things, and also the member participant of the office is able to see a list of all of the firm exclusive agreements that have been registered for the firm. So we're
just
trying
to clarify that,
Yep.
the MP or the admin can see, they're the only ones that can see the list of the firm exclusives, but anybody can fill out this registration form.
Right. So
Okay.
the listing agent, if there's an admin who has that level of permission in the system,
Yeah.
and the broker in charge. And then, so to see those, there's somewhere where they can see them. Hang on.
I don't really foresee us having many of those, but I'm sure I could do some research on where to find it if we need it.
Yeah. Let's see. I see it in a different place. So I'm going to check on that, because if somebody were to ask me that question, I wouldn't know the answer. So I got to find that out.
Okay.
Where they see them. But okay. So the clear cooperation policy is working. Prior to May 1 of 2020, we were getting 10 to 13 withheld listing forms per day. That was the old form that agents used to submit. Since May 1st of 2020, we're getting about 3 per day. So, we equate that to that we're getting less than a third of what they were before for clear cooperation. So it's working, right? If you look at it from that perspective. But we are getting killed with tons of questions that are really tied to this tight inventory situation that we're in. And lots of questions coming from agents about, how did that listing go from being submitted to the MLS to under contract in a day? I just don't understand it, right? Maybe it was on coming soon, no show, or maybe they input it as active and updated it to under contract within a day. So here are some of the reasons why that's happening. Number one, buyers are willing to put in offers sight unseen. It's getting pretty desperate out there. So that's happening more and more. And it could be that, there was a buyer agent in the same firm as the listing agent who had, advanced knowledge about the listing. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, because if you're, you really should not be sharing information about your listings before that delayed marketing date, unless the seller has authorized that coming soon marketing. Otherwise, it should be, between that seller and their listing agent. Okay. And, maybe there's, a team and you're having, people go out and do staging and things like that. And that's understandable. That's reasonable. But those people should not be talking, and it shouldn't be, we shouldn't be using the delayed marketing date as a way to circumvent cooperation with other participants of the MLS, right? If that's what's happening, then you should be treating that as a firm exclusive listing, that it's going to be an in-house listing for a certain period of time. And then once we're ready to go to market, then we'll put it on the MLS and we'll get an amendment to the listing agreement. But doing it this other way is not being completely forthright with the seller, right? You're not giving them full knowledge that we're only exposing this in-house to our agents and our pool of buyers. Even though there may be thousands of other agents and buyers out there, they're not getting the same shot. So that's really important here. If you have a concern about a missed opportunity, because we are getting lots of these complaints, you can send it to us. Doesn't necessarily mean a violation occurred, but go ahead and report it. You've got our email address there, compliance@carolinahome.com. Was the listing publicly marketed before it went into the MLS? If it was, let us know. Send us a picture, take a screenshot of the Facebook post, take a picture of the sign, out in the front yard. Send that to us. Let us know the date that you saw it, and we can act on that. Or maybe it was one of those situations where it was input and updated to under contract in the same day, or it was on coming soon, no show status, changed to active, changed to under contract almost immediately. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a violation, because we do have buyers submitting offers sight unseen. But what we are finding a lot of times is that the agent didn't submit the listing to the MLS within that one business day of either the effective date or the marketing date. And a lot of times, agents aren't really paying attention to those fields on the listing agreement, but those fields are very important. The effective date is when the seller signs. And if your listing agreement says we're going by the effective date, then you've got one business day from when that seller signs to get your listing into the MLS, which is not reasonable for most agents, right? You've got to get pictures done. You've got to get the house measured. So you're using that delayed marketing date field. But where it creates problems is if you're putting TBD or unknown or as seller directed in that marketing date field. That leaves it a little bit too squishy for us. So we'd like for you to put an actual date in that field. And if you end up not being able to hit that date, amend your listing agreement, push it out if you need to. But we want to see, a specific date in that field. Otherwise, you really kind of open yourself up to some subjectivity in that regard. So, and then, so sometimes it's a violation, sometimes it's not. But, and typically when brokers are contacting us, they're really just trying to get clarification, because they feel like, well, if another agent's doing something that looks like it's a violation, then, and it's working to their advantage, I want to do that too, right? So a lot of times when agents report these things to us, it's not necessarily that they're trying to get another agent in trouble. It's just that they want to understand the policy and understand how it's being applied. So, we just kind of want to share that. So, but if you have a buyer who's interested in a listing that is in coming soon no-show status, do not sit around and wait for it to change to active. Buyer agents need to, be working on things. Call the listing agent, find out what the deal is. Are they considering offers sight unseen? If they are, is your buyer willing to do that, right? Make sure your buyer's ready with their due diligence fee, with their earnest money deposit. How long is it going to take them to submit an offer, right? So make sure you're ready and your buyers are ready to go. If you're the listing agent, know how coming soon no-show status works. Agents can schedule appointments to show the property for when that delayed, future marketing date occurs. So if you've got a listing, let's say, it's February 18th. Let's say you put a listing in the system and the delayed marketing date is going to be March the 1st, right? Then, and you've got 25 showings scheduled for March the 1st, and you get an offer sight unseen from a buyer. You have to present all offers, right? So you present that offer to the seller and they say, oh, that looks pretty good. What you ought to be saying to your seller is, okay, yeah, this looks good. We've got 25 showings scheduled for March the 1st. Should we jump on this offer or should we wait and see what these other 25 potential buyers might do, right? That's really important. And one of the situations that I had come up earlier this week was, what obligation does the listing agent have to notify all these other buyers who are, waiting until March 1st? Hey, we've got an offer. Sellers wanting to consider it. If you're at all interested in providing a sight unseen offer, you should do so now, right? And maybe some of those buyers are, and maybe they aren't. But to me, it kind of, circles back to treating all parties fairly. And, if your seller is authorizing you to let other brokers know that they've received an offer or multiple offers, then I think that's important. So, and I'm sure there will be more to come on that because we are not the only market experiencing this. There was a news story on the Today, Good Morning America on Saturday morning where they showed, like, up in New York, cars lined up down the street to do showings on a house that had just come on a market. So anyway, it's going on everywhere, and it's just this tight inventory is really hard to deal with. Stay educated, stay trained, make sure you're using all of the benefits that we offer. Sign up for those Inman news articles if you're not getting those. We provide free Inman access to all of our members, but they are constantly putting out articles, weekly about how buyer agents can help buyers in this tight inventory market. And how should you be helping your sellers in this tight inventory market is a good question too. So, and then, articles from NAR, NC Realtors has a great website with lots of good information there as well. And then the clear cooperation policy should help too. I think part of the frustration that we're hearing now is because you agents and your buyers are seeing these listings in the MLS and go under contract quickly. And I know that's frustrating, but prior to clear cooperation, you wouldn't have even been seeing those listings, right? Because they weren't getting into the MLS. They were all being dealt with off market. So at least now we're seeing this inventory come into the MLS, even if it's not staying there for very long. So if you have, and kind of the other side of the coin, if you have a seller who has concerns about listing property in the MLS, ask them questions, find out what their concerns are, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about on the form. They can opt out of listing syndication if they're concerned about that wide distribution of the listing. Showing time's not required. Lockbox is not required. Listing agent, you can accompany on showings. You can require pre-qualification as long as you're applying that fairly. And then the seller can opt out of having a photo. That was one of the concerns. We talked about using Temp off market as an option if that's needed. Another cool thing with Temp off market is that we changed how that works in late 2019. And the CDOM, cumulative days on market, will actually reset if that property is relisted and it's been in that temp off market for more than 90 days. So if you withdraw the listing and relist it right away, your CDOM will reset if it's been off the market more than 90 days. And then the other thing is we now have this realtorsknowmore.com campaign. And this is all about educating the consumer about the value of a realtor. So this is really what it comes down to is, putting that listing in the MLS creates that maximum market exposure. You're not having to crawl through Facebook posts of other agents posting properties or, posting about their coming soon listings. I mean, that's what the MLS is for. If everybody would put those listings in the MLS, we wouldn't have, these kinds of problems. So share this kind of stuff with your buyer and go to this website, realtorsknowmore.com. These little snippets are videos that you can embed into your own social media. And it's good information that you can use to help educate your sellers about the value of using a realtor, about the value of the MLS. And this is geared towards the public. So, we just started this campaign. And we want all of our members to use this as well to help educate your sellers. So one of the issues that's been coming up is about publicly marketing an unlisted property. So number one, we talked about clear cooperation, but there have been a handful of issues that have been reported to us where there was no signed listing agreement. And, that's kind of a big deal because real estate regulations in North and South Carolina require real estate brokers to have a written agency agreement with the owner before marketing a property. So that's really troublesome that agents are, promoting properties for sale without having that in place first. Number one, you're working for free when you do that, right? So that's not too good. But then also, it's potentially a violation of these real estate regulations. So if we get a complaint like that, then what we will do is refer that matter to the Canopy Realtor Association's grievance committee for consideration. So, it's worse than MLS rules violation. It's code of ethics. It's possible state regulations. So don't do that. And we have a website that you can go to, sort of a specific dedicated page about clear cooperation. You just go to carolinarealtors.com// clear cooperation. And you can find all of this information that I've talked about. There's a flyer. You can see that firm exclusive agreement form there. All of the different rule changes that were approved as a result of this. There's a brochure that you can use to educate your photographers, your home stagers. I think you can use it to educate sellers as well. And some frequently asked questions are posted there also. And you can always reach out to us, compliance@carolinahome.com. You've got our phone number there. This goes to MLS support and then dial option 6, and that'll get to the compliance staff. So now I'm almost done. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was advertising internet displays. And we had, not a lot of violations of this last year, but it's a common question that I get. So I like to include this. So anytime you're advertising another broker's listing on social media, it can be done, but you have to link directly to a display that complies with the IDX rules. So I should have looked to see if Wilson Realty had an IDX website. I'm assuming you probably do. So
Yeah,
so that's the best way to do it. Copy that listing, copy the link to the listing from your website, paste it into your social media, add whatever little text you want to add, no more than 200 characters, and then you're linking to that full display of the listing. And you're driving consumers to your brokerage website instead of other third-party sites, right? So that's the way to do it. Be careful not to exceed that 200 character limit with your post. Remove your post if the link no longer works. So if the listing is withdrawn or it's expired, you want to remove that because you don't want to be advertising something, making it look like it's for sale when it's not, right? And then Facebook Live videos, I haven't had many questions about that lately, but if you're doing a Facebook Live video of another broker's listing, if it's for your own specific customer or client, that's one thing. But if you're broadcasting that to like your entire following, that's probably a violation. So you don't want to do that. And for Instagram, unless you are Insta famous, Instagram does not provide the ability to include a direct link to a display that complies with the IDX rules. And I haven't met anyone in real life who's Insta famous. Those are like celebrities, right? So, so pretty much Instagram is out of the question for other brokers' listings. And then avoid adding additional text about the listing that might be subject to change. So if you're quoting a price, that can change, or the status, that can change. So you kind of want to be careful about those things that can change. As far as Code of Ethics is concerned and the state regulations, Code of Ethics and the South Carolina state regulations require real estate advertisements to disclose the name of the firm in a reasonable and a readily apparent manner, either in the advertisement or via a link to a display with all required disclosures. So here I call this the one-click rule. If you can click on it and get to a full display for Code of Ethics in South Carolina, that's good enough. But North Carolina goes a step further, and that's important to note. So the one-click rule doesn't apply for North Carolina. So anywhere you're displaying listing information, then you have to have on that page the name of the firm or sole proprietorship with which the listing broker is affiliated. So that's where we get complaints about agents advertising listings on their own personal Facebook or their own personal social media, because those oftentimes do not include the name of the firm. So, and I know you guys probably know better than I do about how those business pages work in Facebook, but you've got to make sure you've got the name of your firm or your sole proprietorship in any type of social media displays of another broker's listing. So this is kind of an example of what looks like is okay. So here, this is a business Facebook page, John Doe ABC Realty. It's got a link to a list of all the homes available under 250,000, and that's okay, right? They're able to display a link. When you click on that link, it goes to their IDX page where they kind of have this pre-programmed list of those properties. So that's okay. Here's where we're getting a little bit outside of the box. Probably got too much text right here. This is more than 200 characters, right? You can't see it, but there's multiple photos down here. That's not a violation. That's okay. And here you've got the link, and that's going to take you to the IDX compliant display. So where it can be a problem is if this listing is no longer available. So that was the issue with this particular one that got reported to me, is that the listing was no longer available. So that one needed to come down, and they had too much text there.
So is it okay when we make announcements of like under contract or sold, is that okay? Or should we go back and delete the old ones that say like new listing, stuff like that?
If it's under contract, it's important that you be either the listing broker or the selling broker on that. I know as a selling broker, you have the right to report that. That's protected in the Code of Ethics. But if you're linking back to your IDX display, should be okay, because it's going to go from under contract to closed, right? And as long as, well, I guess maybe in the text, if it's still saying under contract when it's closed, I would be hard pressed to see somebody file a complaint about that. But I guess technically you should probably update that text once it does close, because you wouldn't want to give a misimpression on that. And then for sold listings, I mean, you can share your sold listings through social media. and say something like this one just closed, or, you know, whatever you want to say. But yeah, totally, that's okay. And then, so here's sort of an Instagram, and this is why it's an issue. Is like over here, you can see the person put a link that somebody could copy and paste, but it has to be a clickable link. And that's why Instagram doesn't work, because these are not clickable links. So just FYI there. And then that's pretty much it for me. So I've covered all that I wanted to get through. Did you guys have any questions?
Because if you guys have questions, you can just unmute yourself or put it in the chat box or something.
All right. Well, it sounds like maybe you don't, but if you think of something later and you want to get in touch with us, you can just send an email to compliance@carolinahome.com or give us a call, 940-3159. And option 6 is going to be your MLS rules. Let me take a look too. Somebody had posted in the chat. Coming soon form is also on .loop. So you would uploaded that. Hey, by the way, if you're uploading forms, we just updated all of them. So make sure you've got the most current forms in the .loop. Every single form. We have 17 forms. Make sure they're all updated.
Okay, I'll make sure.
Yeah. So, okay. So if you guys think of anything, just reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions, and appreciate your time and your willingness to be more informed about the MLS rules.
Thank you so much, Debbie.
You're welcome.
Okay, have a good day.
That was really great. Thank you so much, Debbie.
You're welcome. You have a good day too.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.